I swear that clickbait thumbnail better not get 1 million hits or I will lose all faith in humanity. Anyways, so I like to do these speculative ship things every once in a while, usually before a big ship sale where we know new concepts will be dropping, because this year has been pretty light on the patches and we're going to be getting a couple back to back here, hopefully, which I have a feeling hopefully is going to be the theme of this post. I felt like it was high time to engage in a little mild and probably wild speculation. So if that sounds good, let's get this. So last SitCon, we got this running view of coming concept ships that were, in theory, coming in the next year, which is this year. So let's go through them. So the Mirai Pulse, we know about that one. The X1, we've already got that. The NERSA, and I got to get my pause button ready here, which we got the NERSA. The MPUV with the tractor beam attached, we got that one. So this one's a little controversial because people are seeing an RSI ship. What I am seeing is something different. So let's take a look at this. So this is the E1 Spirit. You can sort of see it's got these guns up front here. It would make sense for luggage if there was a separate compartment that were to drop down and that's where you put your luggage so people aren't going up this weird ass ramp in the back. For me, what would make more sense, you can sort of see that the winglets are sort of in the right place. Totally possible it's an RSI ship because this is supposed to be RSI's year, but we know the E1 is supposed to be on the way. So my bet for this one, E1, could easily be wrong. RSI ship would also make sense, but I'm leaning Crusader. Then we got this weird ass thing that is probably Mirai. I would lean Mirai on this. Yeah. I mean, the going rumor is that this is a Mirai heavy fighter called the Raptor or something like that. I could see that. In fact, I think you can actually see MI. I never noticed that before. So a Mirai ship would make a lot of sense. I had hopes this would be something else, but Mirai makes sense. We haven't seen this one yet. This is the Legionnaire, and we, of course, during the SitCon, they said that all of the ships in here are coming in the next 12 months. So come November, all of these ships that we're seeing should be in game or damn close to it. But this one, we kind of got news, I want to say, on Spectrum a little while back that they were kind of putting pause on this one, which would make sense because one of the issues with the Legionnaire is that it'll need the hacking game loop to be working in order for its little proboscis to go up and link to other ships. Apparently they're kind of having problems with that. So this is one of those ships that's kind of in the maybe territory. That we might not get this year, even though they said it. It would make sense that they would drop it just because you could still use it as a drop ship. It's heavily armored. But anyway, this is one that we know what it is. We haven't gotten it yet, and it's still sitting out there. Of course, this is the Zeus, and we know for a fact we're getting... maybe for 3 to 4, we might be getting 1 Zeus, if not 2. At the very least, we know at least the interdiction one, I think it's the EN is out there, and the cargo version is ready to go. Both of those are ready to rock. So, yeah, we should be seeing those real soon, if not 3 to 4, real damn soon. The Tally, we have already gotten it. And of course, the big one, the Polaris. Now, one thing I want to note, and I'm going to go over this a bit later. Note the landing gear. We know that it's changed a little bit since then because we've done the walk around, but it's not much different. Just Pay attention to landing gear because I'm going to come back to that in a bit. Yeah, but Polaris, big boy. So that's that. But we also know, thanks to the latest monthly reports, and hopefully the new progress tracker that we're hopefully getting tomorrow, hopefully, that there are other ships in the pipeline that aren't the ones that we know about. So aren't the ones on that little slideshow. Well, okay, except for that weird ass Mirai thing. And maybe that RSI Crusader ship. We'll see. So let's get into some wild speculation. First off, we know they're working on about 7 straight to flyables. And if things stick to the usual, we'll probably get 1 or 2 for 324's launch, 2 or so for SitCon, and 2 or so for IAE. Usually the IAE is a big ship, and the ones for SitCon, or is it SitCon that usually has the big ship? I think SitCon we usually get a big ship and a small ship. In IAE we usually get a couple medium ships. Could have that backwards. My brain is not flying on all cylinders today. Anyway, pretty safe. At least one of the Zeuses is dropping for 324. We'll probably be getting some sort of small straight to flyable concept as well. I think that is kind of in the cards. It's kind of what the rumor mill is stating, although I'm honestly trying to stay away from that. So if Pipeline has leaked pictures and are saying it's definitely this thing, I'm not in that loop on purpose. So spoil it down in the comments. Anyway, people are saying there is probably going to be a Crusader starter, and I'd buy that. The Spirit is kind of their starter right now, but that's sort of in the Freelancer or Cutlass level. I could see them with something one size down from that. So a true starter size. Think something like the size of the Cutter, the 100i, the Aurora, the Mustang. Something like that would make a lot of sense to me. Now that I think about it, MISC is missing something in that size too, but I would say Crusader is the one with the most assets, or most current up-to-date assets, thanks to the Spirit's development. That would be my guess. So that leaves, what, 5 or 6 more concepts that are out there that we don't know what they are. We got the big-ass weird Mirai thing, which I still have a secret hope is a Banu ship, which it definitely isn't. So let's call it 5 or so. For some clues, let's check out recent weekly report sneak peeks. Digging through images that aren't kiosks or caves, we're left with these. Not sure if we'll get this as a concept or not, although it's bigger than a PTV, and probably just looking at it, probably has the footprint of a Cyclone, so maybe? Still, as far as concepts go, I think this is a long shot. It'll just be something like the medical crash carts that are just laying around. And it'll probably be purchasable in-game, kind of like the cargo containers are. And now that I said that, I think you can actually buy the cargo sleds in 324. I seem to remember that from Evocati. I just think that it wasn't working. Like you'd buy one and it wouldn't show up in your hangar or as part of your inventory. So don't quote me on that. Then there's this one. There were a few shots of the Polaris around this time. I think that this was one of the May weekly reports. So around Invictus time. So it makes sense that this was the Polaris, just to kind of generate spazziness and FOMO and have people want to purchase that ship. Pretty sure this is the Polaris. I mean, unless CIG is being really sneaky here, this is probably the Zeus. It seems a little more civvy than the seat on a warship would be, so I'm leaning that way rather than a Polaris seat or some RSI ship that we don't know about yet. Okay, now this is where it gets a little interesting, because that shape language there is kind of subtle and it fits in with a few design languages of manufacturers. So there's a few guesses and a few different ways I could go with this one. It could just be the interior of a Zeus, but that doesn't seem to fit the layout of what we've seen so far. And if I were to go out on a limb, am I the only one that thinks that looks a little MISC-like, right? Maybe. Other than that, just going on wild speculation, and this being an RSI year, it could be something of an interior rework for the Connie, but I am still leaning maybe a MISC ship or maybe an RSI ship that we haven't seen yet. And I have an idea if it's a MISC ship of which one it might be, but I'll get there in a bit. So now we're going to go back to the landing gear that I was talking about with the Polaris, because when I first saw this image, I was like, oh yeah, it's the Polaris landing gear. But now I'm starting to rethink that. The Polaris had that angled landing gear, and this gear is more chunky. It's more Aegis, maybe even Argo, but we haven't seen an Aegis ship in a while. So yeah, Aegis only has one industrial ship that I could think of offhand, and the Reclaimer. It would make sense if they had at least a couple more in that lineup, right? So I'm going to lean Aegis on this one, which means there's an Aegis ship out there that we haven't heard anything about. So let's hear some speculation on that. Unless I'm way off, I'm pretty sure this is the torpedo bay on the Polaris. Moving on. And that brings us up to last week. And this one is interesting because everything in that picture is just screaming industrial MISC ship to me. I know Xenia and Board Gamer were thinking this might be the Odyssey, and while I think MISC is going to be the next manufacturer up after RSI, just given the state that pretty much all their ships are in, that would make some sense. I think the Odyssey is way too big a ship though, even with its extra long concept sprint a few years back. Instead, I think it might be something a little smaller, a ship that can both potentially close an old loop as well as open a new one. So have I buried the lead enough? Yeah, remember this guy? This is the MISC Expanse, and it's a starter ship for the refining loop. Outside of the engineering and loop issues, we know they've done some sprints on refining ships, although granted, we haven't seen the progress tracker for almost a year, so I can't be sure. But I'm not bitter. Where was I? Right, the Expanse. With 4.0 dropping, well, soon-ish, hopefully at the end of the year. But what would make sense in a system with very little amenities, and most of those locked behind rep gates with criminal gangs? Miners and refiners and refuelers might finally have a place, especially in a system as large as Pyro is going to be. For that matter, the synergy of teaming an Expanse with a prospector or two, and probably a fighter or three to protect them from swarms of pirates, would be a really solid way to make some space bucks. One thing that I'd want to point out, though, is that little winglet doesn't exist anywhere on the concept, but that doesn't mean things haven't changed since the concept dropped. That's my guess anyway. Well, my hope at least. It would be a twofer, maybe even a threefer, to bang out a backlog ship that heralds in a whole new loop, closes the mining loop, and one that'll be needed when they start working on the Galaxy, the RSI Galaxy, and its modules next year, one of which is a refinery. That said, MISC is also missing a true starter-sized ship. The closest thing they have is the Reliant, which is more of a competitor with the Titan, and that thing's cross-section rivals a Freelancer, even if the actual internal space is much less and outdated. God, the MISC lineup needs a rework. Anyways, my bet, hope, is that this ship is going to be the Expanse. Do I think it will be? Probably not, but we'll see. We have probably 4 or 5 mystery ships out there, probably a MISC ship, probably a Crusader ship, which might be the Spirit E1 if they can get the NPCs working, or maybe the current mythological 4th variant that I still think was just showing off the special concept skin and not an actual 4th variant, but I could easily be wrong on that, and maybe an Aegis ship. Oh, and it seems like a pretty safe bet that we're getting a racing variant of the Raven. Forgot to mention that one. So actually, now that I think about it, that's probably the 324 ship if we're only getting one. I mean, we've already seen it flying around in vids and stuff. So what do y'all think? Do you think I missed something? Think there's something else out there? Am I missing an obvious leak, which I usually don't follow because I like speculating more than being spoiled? Let me know down below. And we are getting super, super close to 1,300. So if you're watching this and you've watched a few of these and you haven't subscribed, yeah, I don't really get paid for these, but I still have that little part in my monkey brain that number go up, look good. So yeah, if you like my stuff, let me know by subscribing and liking the vid. Anyways, that's all I got for this one, people. Let me know what you think down below and catch you next time, hopefully for the launch of the new progress tracker later this week. Hopefully.